idea that Hamas is the obstacle is, of course, putting the truth upside down. And the Financial Times is just as stupid as can be in its British mentality about the Middle East. All they should be doing is writing editorials saying, we're sorry, we're sorry, we're sorry. The main point is to understand that bringing down Assad was a long-term Israel-US aim. I can't tell you because on the one side, we've heard calls for peace by Trump and by Vance, the vice president-elect. On the other hand, we have a deep state which is...
My question to you is that when we read your column, we felt that Professor Sachs is a bit naive about this emergence of the Global South. Your response to that? Hello and welcome to another episode of India and Global Left. Today we have with us a very special guest, Professor Jeffrey Sachs. If you are new to our show, please smash the subscribe button. Also consider be a Patreon or a member to have that early access in either event. Do watch our shows and share your comments. Professor Sachs, welcome back to India and Global Left.
Happy New Year. Thank you for having me back.
I want to start with an update on Palestine. I recently had the occasion to interview Norman Finkelstein, and one of the things that he said, and it struck me, is that Gaza is no more. I wanted to have your reaction to that and share your update on what your thoughts are on Gaza.
Of course, we know that 45,000 are dead in Gaza, mostly women and children, overwhelmingly civilians, innocent people whose lives were cut short by Israel's brutality. We know that the infrastructure has been destroyed, and we know the purpose of the Israeli government, which is to ethnically cleanse Gaza and ultimately to incorporate Gaza and the West Bank and the Golan Heights, and it seems part of Syria, parts of Lebanon, into a greater Israel. So this is what Norman Finkelstein is referring to. The situation is catastrophic for the people of Gaza, and it is dire throughout the Middle East because the war not only has continued, it has expanded, and Israel is itching for more war. It would like to draw the United States into a war with Iran.
Are you, okay, my question is, a lot of people are now pessimistic about a reconstruction of Gaza. A lot of ideas are discussed about what should be done. Some of the options being an immediate ceasefire, a massive international aid for reconstruction. What's your way forward as far as stopping this genocide is concerned and then following up?
The key to war is politics. Von Clausewitz is correct in the most famous assessment that war is a continuation of politics with other means. The politics in the case of the war in Gaza is the question of Palestinian political self-determination. This has always been the question. Will there be a state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel, or will Israel dominate all of the Palestinians and an increasing number of other people as well? The leaders of Israel, this regime, is an expansionist regime which views greater Israel, so-called, meaning a territorial, large and expansionist Israel as its objective. And the denial of a Palestinian state is a fundamental part of the vision of this government. The question, therefore, is not who rebuilds the bricks and mortar that was just destroyed in Gaza. The core question is, what is the political outcome? And I continue to believe to this moment that the only viable political outcome, the only one that can produce peace, the only one that is consistent with international law, the only one that can bring an end to the expanding war, is a state of Palestine created according to the standards of international law, which means the borders of the 4th of June, 1967, the capital in East Jerusalem, control over the Islamic holy sites, and with security. This is feasible. It's basically one veto of the U.S. Away. The U.S. is the only blockade to Palestine becoming the 194th UN member state. And then, with a Palestine legally welcomed into the UN, the practical issues, of course, of security, peacekeeping forces, basic urgent reconstruction, and so forth, come to the fore. But they can't even be brought to the forefront without a political solution. There is an overwhelming global consensus on the two-state solution. The UN General Assembly routinely votes for this, at least 170 countries in favor, representing around 95% of the world population. And the opponents are basically the United States and Israel, usually with a smattering of Micronesia, Nauru, Papua New Guinea, maybe Paraguay and Argentina for particular reasons, but basically an overwhelming majority. The G20 has expressed its determination for the two-state solution. The BRICS countries expressed in the Kazan Declaration the determination for the two-state solution. The Arab League expressed in its Bahrain Declaration the two-state solution. It's everywhere, except it's blocked by the United States. So this is the main point. Israel, of course, it's against it. It's fundamentally, violently, virulently against it for absolutely unacceptable reasons, either because of a completely false narrative about Israel's security, or because of some, I think, absolutely wild claim that, well, we were given this land 2,900 years ago. It's ours, no matter what, no matter who lives there, no matter what. And this is essentially the situation we're in. One country blocks peace, and that's the United States, because Israel does not have a veto over this issue.
I wanted to ask you also about the internal politics. I know that's not our prime concern, but still, I was just curious what your thoughts are. The New York Times and the so-called liberals and the left take this position that it's Hamas that's the problem on Palestinian side, and it's Netanyahu that's the problem on the Israeli side. On the other hand, the Financial Times covered a detailed article called "What's Left of Hamas," and it might surprise a lot of people that what they say is that whatever minimally is left in terms of governance, whether it's about providing critical healthcare or even adjudicating legal matters or bringing in stolen mobile phones, it's Hamas-led organizations in Gaza that's still in operation. So I was just curious what your thoughts on Hamas are, and what could be some of the representative organizations within the Palestinian movement. Also, just to end my long question is, we are seeing huge infighting in the occupied West Bank between the PA, the Palestinian Authority, and sections of Hamas. What are your thoughts on the internal politics?
The internal politics are not the key. The key is a political settlement, because if there were a political settlement, there would also be a solution to the internal politics. There would also be a Palestinian state constituted it would not get external support for a war against Israel. Israel's security would actually be achieved in the context of a two-state solution. So what we're seeing is all the pathology that comes from in Israeli occupation, in Israeli ethnic cleansing, an Israeli genocidal set of actions by design to create this greater Israel. The rest, if I may say, is details. It's tragic details, but all solvable in the context of an overall political solution. You can't solve the political solution for Palestine intra-Palestinian. The problem is Israel. The problem is not intra-Palestinian. So this is a complete distraction. Hamas is a distraction. Hamas, to be a fighting force, depends on external funding. But in a political solution, that ends. There's peace. You get a UN support for a different kind of settlement. So the whole idea that Hamas is the obstacle is, of course, putting the truth upside down. The truth is, the obstacle is Israel doesn't want a state of Palestine, period. So clear. It's been true the whole history of Israel, but especially with the rise of Netanyahu's party in 1978, the Likud. The whole party's committed to having no state of Palestine, period. So all of the internal issues are things that people talk about to distract themselves. And by the way, on this, you can't believe a word of the British press. Because, look, Britain messed up the whole world. And one of the things that Britain messed up was the Middle East. And the Financial Times is just as stupid as can be in its British mentality about the Middle East. All they should be doing is writing editorials saying, we're sorry, we're sorry, we're sorry. Instead, they take ridiculous positions all over the place because the British Empire is a ridiculous nostalgia for them rather than, focusing on current real issues. I'm sorry to say it, but this is what we read in the English language press. We read the nostalgia of past empires or the delusions of current empires like the United States.
You mentioned the 1967 border, and I'm not sure if that's a very direct reference to the two-state solutions. Now
Yes.
people are describing, so there is one side that says that you cannot unravel 750,000 or a million settlements to talk about two state. So the solution has to be one state. And there is another side which says that even if it's a million settlers, amount of area that they occupy are not huge, and there are cartographic maps and other things that says that a two-state solution is still feasible. I wanted to have your response on these two line of arguments.
Well, they're both right. I'm not against a one-state solution. I'm not against a two-state solution. I am in favor of noting one basic point, that the Israeli settlements were known from the first moment to be illegal. They started at the end of the 1960s. I went to Israel the first time in 1972, and it was explained to me how Israel is, quote, putting facts on the ground. They knew this was illegal. So any excuse that, well, you can't have a Palestinian state now because, they're settlers, well, that was Israel's point. So we have to find a solution to that. Practically speaking, every one of those settlements from the first day was known to be illegal. This isn't some trick pulled on these settlers now. Oh, you're living in Palestine. They knew that. They knew they were living in occupied territories. They want to. That's the purpose of those settlements, is to ignore international law, to ignore UN Security Council Resolution 242, which was made in 1967, to say these are occupied territories and they're going to have to go back out of Israel's control. And so this is a real practical issue. There's no doubt about it. My own feeling is make two states. The Israeli settlers who have been living illegally in occupied lands, they can stay there for many, many years, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, who knows? But make a state of Palestine and then work on the practicalities to undo what was knowingly done by Israel with the purpose of subverting a state of Palestine.
I want to shift the conversation to Syria and start with your assessment of the al-Assad legacy. I'm particularly interested in your thoughts about two set of arguments, two set of viewpoints, if you like. One is that Assad was a monster, and whatever has happened opens up a possibility of democracy and freedom. And the other side says that, well, Assad was obviously not the utopia one can imagine, but nevertheless, he stood with the axis of resistance, particularly with the question of Palestine. Even though he was getting more conservative gradually, he was also less sectarian. What is your assessment of Assad legacy?
The main point is to understand that bringing down Assad was a long-term Israel-U.S. aim. And what happened was the outcome of a long-term Israeli-U.S. game. We know back in 2001 already, the U.S. game plan based on an Israeli-U.S. agreement and understanding, which was to change the face of the Middle East by bringing down actually 7 regimes that were pro-Palestinian. And these were spelled out to our general, former NATO Supreme Commander, General Wesley Clark. He was shown famously the piece of paper that said 7 wars in 5 years: Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Sudan, Somalia, and Libya. And the idea was these are oppositionist states, which meant they support the Palestinian cause. And so it's not the character of the internal regimes, it is their geopolitics that was the issue. And the idea was we need to bring them down. And Netanyahu's been the main cheerleader of war across the Middle East and the Horn of Africa from the 1990s onward. And the U.S. has used its normal tools, its economic sanctions, its financial sanctions, its CIA operations, its support for jihadists, its direct military engagement. In each of those places, 6 out of 7 have been in outright war. NATO brought down Libya. The United States supported the destruction of Somalia. The U.S. actively broke apart Sudan. The United States backed Israel to invade Lebanon on several occasions. The U.S. used the CIA and its sanctions and its direct war to bring down Assad. The U.S. invaded Iraq. So this game plan didn't work on the 5-year timeline. It didn't work, in my view, on any other standard as well, other than its brutality and its success eventually in actually changing regimes, not in making peace, not in solving problems, not in accomplishing anything other than bloodshed, but it has been carried out. And so the question of the internal character of the Syrian regime is really a side point, to tell you the truth. The main point is that this was part of a U.S. plan all along to bring down regimes in the Middle East that Israel deemed to be supportive of Hamas and
What do you think might be the US approach to the HTS? There are some reports about a possible election in Syria in 3 to 4 years after drawing a constitution, and some are reporting that the US might be negotiating some understanding between its traditional ally, the Syrian, the Kurdish Democratic Forces in the northeast, and the HTS. Any idea what might happen on that front?
Let's just say, let's talk in 4 years. I hope we talk before 4 years. This is all fantasy land. I don't think Syria is going to be a stable, peaceful country of a liberal or illiberal democracy. We've got a lot of head. And all of this, it would be like asking me in 2001 what's going to happen in the 2005 Afghanistan elections. You know, the whole thing is crass game playing with a lot of powers dividing up Syria right now, with Israel taking Syrian territory, bombing Syria as we speak, with Turkey having its machinations. So there's a lot ahead.
Yeah, no, I asked the question not because I'm interested in the election,
Yes.
but to understand the alliance. Because I mean, if you talk about the Afghanistan election, one could have easily said that the strategy is very clear that they would back the Northern Alliance, the Turkish and the Hazaras and the other non-Pashtun groups, and then they are out there to eliminate the Pashtun and let the Taliban here. But here we are confused because the HTS was offshoot of Al Qaeda, which was once designated which is still designated as terrorist, and on the other hand, the SDF is its traditional ally. So
Well, you know, I think one thing that's confusing is that Al Qaeda also is a creation of the CIA. So you know, it's not so clear, and it's been said at times that the Pentagon and the CIA were fighting on opposite sides. U.S. foreign policy is a morass of tactics and imbecility, and the creation of Al Qaeda, starting in Afghanistan with the Mujahideen in 1979, is exactly that. The U.S. has long used jihadists to fight its battles against the Soviet Union or against supposed Israel opponents and so forth. So the reason that it's murky is that it's not only murky, it has never made much sense, U.S. policy, and it doesn't work in the end. So whether HTS is friend or foe, it's both. You know, this has been the game all along for the U.S.
To talk about one last murky question in terms as far as Syria is concerned is what are your thoughts about U.S. Turkey relationship as far as Syria goes? Because there's tremendous contradiction as far as the Kurdish movement in northeast and the north of Syria is concerned, and Turkey and U.S. are also NATO quote unquote allies. What do you have in mind in this regard?
More and more contradictions. Obviously, Turkey has its own history and interests. It's a major regional power. Turkey is also rather vulnerable financially in the past decade. Basically, Turkey had a financial crisis that resulted in part from a geopolitical crisis that itself is murky, an attempted coup against Erdogan that led to a downward spiral financially, and Turkey therefore is vulnerable financially to U.S. pressures, but it has very different interests from the U.S. And it's focused on its regional power, it's focused on the Kurds, and the idea that both are allies, a little bit complicated. And remember also that Turkey is an aspirant of the BRICS countries, and I think will become a BRICS member country at some point. So the US and Turkish interests are definitely not strictly aligned by any means. But on the other hand, Turkey has vulnerabilities to US pressure. This is certainly the case.
I want to move to Ukraine and understand from you what do you think is the current situation as far as U.S.-Russia relationship is concerned. There are reports about massive last-moment desperate escalation from Biden administration, whether it's in terms of money. We are hearing about some new $6 billion aid, the restrictions on ballistic missiles being brought down and anti-personnel tanks, and Russia responds by lowering thresholds of use of nuclear heads. And the new administration is coming in the US. Update us on that front.
I think the situation is uncertain because the typical American deep state view would certainly be continue to escalate. Why lose an opportunity to kill more Russians? Why lose an opportunity to put more pressure on the Russian government? What's another $100 billion for the US? This would definitely be the view of the US security state. It's got several problems with it. One is that from the very start, escalation really could lead to nuclear escalation. And all those who say, no, don't worry about that, are out of their minds and so irresponsible that I have a hard time actually fathoming their idiocy or lying. Okay, having said that, because I'm really an opponent of nuclear war, and yet we take steps closer and closer to it because of the imbecility of people like senior members of the Biden administration. The other point is, even the American people are a little tired of $100 billion here, $100 billion there. My neighborhood is packed with homeless people, shootings, knifings. I just heard a report from where a conference is taking place in San Francisco. It's not even safe to walk the streets. The American people are really disgusted by this deep state ruling class of the United States, which has spent trillions and trillions of dollars of our money on these useless, what they view as video games, I think, but are causing rivers of bloodshed in Ukraine and in the Middle East and in Africa. So this is the question. The deep state would like to continue playing. For them, it's just chips at the poker table. The American people are sick of it. The Ukrainian people would like peace, but they're led by a dictator, a little dictatorial regime backed by the United States, which doesn't ask the opinion. And instead, it drags young people off the streets, throws them to the front line to their deaths. And this is what we call American-style democracy. So the whole thing is surrealistic. And if you ask me what's going to happen, I can't tell you because on the one side, we've heard calls for peace by Trump and by Vance, the vice president-elect. On the other hand, we have a deep state which is hubris to the core and which loves playing poker with other people's lives and other people's money.